Hey guys, it's me, Althazar, and welcome to another episode of Achieving Perfection. And this one's finally it, guys. It's the one we've been waiting for. That really, really hard, terrible one where you have to take 10 or less damage. So this is going to be for the Hour of Devastation, bottom left node. So let's go ahead, show off the decks. So if you want to copy paste them, go ahead. And then if you want to listen to explanations and all that kind of nitty gritty goodness, stay tuned. So you can go Gideon 1 and use something like this. You could go Liliana 1. You'll see that I've got two newer decks here, right? Two decks for newer players. You could go with something like this. Or if you have more at your disposal, you can't use God Pharaoh, so you can go with the Ravager or the other newer one. For Bolas, you could go with something like this. Or if you wanted to go just the straight up damage, kill your opponent before they can deal damage to you, you could go something like this. The deck that I detailed is what I think is the best PvP deck in the game. Or you could go with a white version of the deck and go with something like this. So you've got a Vigilance creature and deploy. Or you could go a completely different route and you could go something like this with a bunch of damage prevention. Or you could go yet another route and go Tamio and use something like this. Or even something like this. Right? So it's sort of like the Teferi deck, but now you can just fetch creatures in a million more ways. Yeah. Okay. So those are all the decks that I'm going to go ahead and suggest. I know that's a lot of decks, but there's a lot of ways you can go about this. So node 2 left. You need to win the fight, you lose 3 or less creatures, and you need to take 10 or less damage during the fight. So this one's tough. I can't break it any other way. It's tough. So my success rate on this particular event is about 75% for perfection. It's my lowest chance, and it's my lowest percent of any event. And it's just because of this node right here. The other two are pretty gimmies, but yeah, that one's savage. All right, so let's get into stuff for newer players first. So Gideon Battleforged is pretty good in that when you fully level him up, that Sharp Eyes ability, when it's going to go ahead and give Vigilance, it's going to give Regenerate, so it's going to heal a little bit, and Flying, which is really good. So this deck is based on you having Gideon leveled up a little bit more. But if you give something like Knight of the White Orchid a power boost and a toughness boost and Flying and Vigilance, because he already has First Strike, he's going to be able to block a lot of what's being thrown at you, especially if you're a newer player. You're probably not really going to be expecting to run into a lot of things like Olivia or Decimator of Provinces. I know that Olivia's been on sale for $4 a bunch of times, and honestly, if you're even willing to put any money in the game, it's an excellent purchase because it's one of the most powerful cards in the game. But yeah, Knight of the White Orchid can be paired with Dauntless Bodyguard to become a prevent damage wall. And so you throw in Court of Calling, which is an event reward, and you really just need to pair Dauntless Bodyguard with anything that has Defender, right? Or it doesn't even need to because of Gideon's ability. You put it with something that has First Strike. So I threw Fencing Ace in because Gideon doesn't really have great mana bonuses. So this thing's going to have Double Strike, or really for the purpose that you need First Strike to be able to block things, and you find a way of giving it prevent damage. Now, other than that, you're going to want to make sure that you're able to take care of some of the other really baddies. So Desert's Hold is kind of just a better version of Suppression Bond, the rare from here, we'll just do it this way, right? The rare from Origins. It looks like this here. So first creature your opponent controls is disabled for 6, but here you've got first creature your opponent controls is disabled for 4. If you have a desert in your graveyard, you can gain life, but we're not using deserts, so ignore that. Cast out is an incredibly good option if you don't have, especially if you don't have other forms of removal. I honestly think it's better than most forms of removal, and I would say that for this node it's better than Hixus because you don't get hit ideally, and this just keeps them disabled until it dies. It has 3 shields, which is a lot for an uncommon, so it stays out. And if you can get your opponent's entire creature board down with that, you basically just win unless they're playing red, and you just hate red players in that node. Mortify. This is going to destroy creatures. That's great. Smite the Monstrous is going to destroy creatures. That's great. Demystify is going to get rid of nasty supports for really cheap, which is great. You can use any of your destroy supports, though. That's fine. So I'd really go ahead, run something in this general framework, but Dragon's Horde is gem conversion, but make sure you've got gem conversion. Make sure that you've got things that are going to disable creatures. Cast out is best option. If you've got Dauntless Bodyguard, go ahead and pair it with something that you're going to be giving that first strike, that vigilance boost with Gideon, and that should help you a lot. If you go the Liliana route, you're really looking to play that corrupt, that first ability, and you're looking to control your opponent by having no cards. So the other nice thing about Liliana is going to grant you access to things like Bedevil, Status, and Murder, which all 3 have flash. This destroys a creature. This is going to give one of your creatures Death Touch and Defender, and this is going to destroy a creature. Now, ideally, when you're giving Death Touch and Defender to one of your critters, you're not going to lose it, but let's face it, if you're using Status, it's because you don't want to lose the 10 damage objective. So you just got to be careful not to lose 3 creatures, right? So that brings us to our creatures. And here, if you have creatures that can remove creatures, then that's a pretty big win. So the Ravenous Chupacabra is going to destroy a creature when it comes out. The Lashweed Lurker is going to go ahead and put it on top of your opponent's library, which is pretty nice because then you can just force them to discard it. And Urgoros is going to make your opponent discard cards every turn, and it could eventually get you card draw also. So that's fantastic. If you have Infinite Obliteration, I would use it over something like Transgress the Mind, or maybe just use both. But in discarding your opponent's first card, it just drains all the mana and gets rid of it, and it costs like nothing to play and is going to put you in a very nice advantage hold. Eldest Reborn, if you have it, it destroys creatures. It's going to make your opponent discard, which you want that to happen, and then you get to take their creatures. And let's face it, if you're running these creatures, taking your opponent's creatures, they're probably going to be stronger creatures anyways, so that's great. And then at the bottom, you've got Gem Conversion. You generally are going to need that pretty badly with Origins Walkers, but what you'll see is that there's a lot of removal here, there's a lot of discard, and there's a lot of flash removal. So this brings us to some of my later strategies. All right, so these are more advanced things that you can do. So Lich's Mastery is great. It prevents damage, but if it breaks, you lose the objective immediately. So Lich's Mastery pairs great with Platinum Angel, who already does work on this particular node because it's going to prevent all the damage you take, and it's going to get -1/-1 counters instead. I should note that this doesn't count as prevent damage either. It just takes the damage for it instead, so it should be bypassing effects that ignore prevent damage. Whir of Invention is in here with a few things. So Whir of Invention I often use with just Omniscience, but here if you get any of either Lich's Mastery or Killer Instinct or Omniscience, you're doing great. Killer Instinct is going to be getting you Platinum Angels or these nasty buggers that are going to come in and create 4 defensive tokens that will disable all of your opponent's creatures. And because it's whenever a colorless creature enters the battlefield under your control, disable all your opponent's creatures, this is colorless. So every turn with Killer Instinct down, Drowner of Hope or Platinum Angel will be freezing all your opponent's creatures, and Platinum Angel is going to give you prevent damage. So it's a pretty wicked combo. Dark Ritual is in here just because there's some high cost cards, and you want to make sure that you get your prevent damage stuff down before you take damage. So it's important to have things like that. Murder is in here as just flash removal, which is really important. And River's Rebuke is in here in case your opponent tries to get into a protracted support battle with you and they have their own things like Lich's Mastery. So this is an incredibly solid deck. It's very good. You can definitely go ahead and use that. My own personal preference is honestly going to be one of the following two. I've used this one to perfection a bunch of times. I've honestly never lost a point in the node using this deck, and it has really very little defense apart from what's maybe the best removal card in the game because it only costs 3. So if you have this, definitely use it. But this deck just wins so fast, so consistently, so always, that if you're playing this deck correctly, it's definitely worth it. If you're using this deck for the first time in the event, you might wind up losing points just because you're not so familiar with how it works. So maybe the white one would be better if you've never played it. But the general point is you fish for omniscience. So you use things like strategic planning or Days Undoing or Apex of Power to find omniscience or Whir of Invention. Always try for charging Whir of Invention first because it costs less mana. You get omniscience down, and then you get the card draw going with Combustible Gearhulk. You can kill with just card draw, or because this wanker over here gives haste, you can kill once that hits down. And it's going to be the exact same strategy over here. It just feels a little bit safer with this sometimes because you've got the Angel at 18 with Vigilance. So in the event that you don't kill, your opponent's going to come in, they're going to hit this thing, and that can feel pretty comfy. Or, if you play Deploy the Gatewatch, you're probably going to get the Angel, and so that can make it feel more comfy, but I find that the Sarkhan one is a bit more consistent. The other bonus to Teferi, if you decide to go with this instead, and you have all these cards, which means you've got a pretty extensive collection, is that he's got excellent mana gains all around, so you can use your gem swaps defensively to just try and limit your opponent's mana while you get great mana boosts. Whew. Okay, oh yeah, there's another one. Boop, boop, don't forget. Okay, this one. Now, we've already gone over Platinum Angel and Omniscience. This lets you run Deploy the Gatewatch with things like Angel of Grace. This is going to give you and your creatures prevent damage, so you're going to take no damage, and your creatures are going to block and kill things, and it's amazing. Razia is not likely to die. It's got even more prevent damage. It's probably going to be killing your opponent's creatures, and it's going to be hitting your opponent pretty hard. Things like Court of Calling are going to let you fetch any of your 3 angels, but you can play it early. Oh no! To get Platinum Angel. Gideon's Intervention. This is just further damage prevention, so just keep yourself safe, keep yourself safe, keep yourself safe. Insidious Will is going to preemptively prevent any of your opponent's nonsense. So this card is amazing. It just sort of locks your opponent from doing anything bad, especially since Greg is probably going to be charging some really big, nasty mythic masterpiece thing that's going to cost definitely more than 6, puts you at an advantage. And Isolate's going to give you exile on creatures or supports, so you don't have to worry about recursion, which is really important. Okay, Teferi down. Tamio, you're up. This is another version of that deck. It's going to be a more consistent version of that other deck because it has green, and with green, we can Finale of Devastation to get either of those angels. We can Vivian's Invocation to get either of those angels. We've got Startled Awake for more consistent mana gains in conjunction with Blue Sun for more card draw. We've got Killer Instinct here, which you can't use with Teferi. That's going to fetch us those angels. And then we've got Imprison the Moon and the Intervention, which I've already outlined. So this one is going to be a really consistent version of the deck, and it's really just all about damage prevention. Instead of Platinum Angel, if you don't have it, you can use another angel that has damage prevention. Oops, there's 2 of these. So really just any of your vigilant damage prevention things. And now the last thing that I wanted to really highlight is, once again, Drowner of Hope, and using a combo off of this to make it so that you disable your opponent's creatures every turn. And so you can use something like From Beyond that's going to be making Eldrazi tokens. If you don't have this, you can actually go ahead and use Thopter Spy Network. That also works for making colorless creatures every turn, or some other thing like that that's going to be creating tokens, just so that your opponent gets locked down and can't do anything. And so here, you're going to see that I've got a bunch of conversion. So Rishkar's an Hour of Promise. The downside to Drowner of Hope is that, let's say that your opponent gets a flying hasty down, so like Olivia or something, and you don't want that to hit you. That's why I threw Sandworm Convergence in. It's just so that once the Olivia comes down, it can't attack you, and then it's going to start getting disabled because Sandward Convergence doesn't let things with flying attack you. So this is going to go ahead and take care of that little piece, and then all of the other pieces are pretty self-explanatory from the other decks. So you've really got one of two options to go for this node. One is the all-out blitz your opponent and kill them before they hurt you. I've actually gone perfect in this node by using my Cothosaurus deck. Cothosaurus has been a dinosaur version. It's not this one here, but something sort of like this one, just all dinosaurs instead. And I was able to do it just because I killed fast, but it's definitely not the way to go. So use something like one of the Omni decks if you have them. If you don't, go a heavy control deck, and good luck. Let me know which deck you use. Let me know how you do. And if you have any other suggestions, throw them on into the pile. I'd love to hear more of them. Good luck. I hope you make perfect, and I hope to see you in the next one.